And the topic of the day, bluntly, the topic of the day is the biggest story in college football right now. And that is what the heck is going on at Texas A&M. If you listen to this show on Monday's Aaron Torres pod, we dove into this from all angles. Why did Jimbo Fisher get fired? Why was it now? And who were the early candidates to keep an eye out for? And so what I want to do today is I want to go ahead and dive deeper because there have been several new updates just since Monday's show that are absolutely worth diving into. And before we even get into them, let me say this. I said it on Monday's show. It has been confirmed by multiple people in that Texas A&M market. And that is that this is a very unique and very interesting coaching search that is going to take a lot of twists and turns over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Because when Jimbo Fisher was hired in 2017, remember, it was clear that before they even fired Kevin Sumlin, I could tell you, I know for a fact, they had 2 or 3 names in mind, the biggest names in all of college football, headlined by Jimbo Fisher. This year, that is not the case at all. They are going in with an open mind. There is not a surefire, can't miss guy that they definitively want or they believe that they are going to definitively get. And so this coaching search is going to take on a lot of layers over the next couple weeks. But what I want to do now is take a minute and kind of dive into some of the names that maybe have already publicly said thanks, but no thanks. And also, let's get into some of the interesting new developments over the last day or two. Let's start with some hard no's, right? The strongest word of the English language is no, and there are a couple coaches that have just said thanks, but no thanks. I think the biggest name, the most obvious one, Dan Lanning, the head coach at Oregon. He has been, I think he was at the top of everybody's list, and why wouldn't he be? Mid-30s, recruiting his butt off, has a college football playoff contender. He is, in my opinion, the future of college football coaching. Gets it, gets recruiting, gets player development, accepts NIL for what it is. Well, he was asked about the Texas A&M opening on Monday night at his press conference. And there are some times when a coach will make a non-denial denial and basically say, oh, yeah, no, I'm not interested. But you kind of leave the door open where maybe they're a little bit more interested than you think. Not Dan Lanning, not in this case. Here is what Dan Lanning said when he was asked about the Texas A&M opening. He said, I think I've been really, really clear since day one. Everything I want exists right here. I'm not going anywhere. There's 0% chance I would be coaching somewhere else. I've got unfinished business here. He continued. A lot of coaches hang on these moments and they don't do anything or they don't say anything. 1, because they don't want egg on their face when they decide to do something else. 2, they're concerned about things that I'm not concerned about, like getting a better contract. So let me just say this. Shout out to Dan Lanning because he left zero doubt. And listen, I don't think he would be that emphatic if there was secretly a 2, 5, 10% interest in him taking the job or him leaving for that job. But what I respect about him, this was the same blueprint that he had last year when the Auburn job opened. If you remember, there was a crack in the door, a little window where it felt like, okay, is Dan Lanning a legitimate candidate? Coached at Alabama, coached at Georgia. Could this be the job that gets him back to SEC country? And he slammed that door shut. He just shut it all down. And I loved it because he did the same thing last year. He said, I have zero interest. This is the job that I want. This is the job that I love. This is the only place that I want to coach. Now, do I think he's going to retire at Oregon? He's like 36, 37 years old. I don't think anybody anywhere 37 is going to retire. Most people are not going to retire where they are right now. But do I believe that he is very happy at Oregon and absolutely not going anywhere? Yeah, I don't think he is going anywhere anytime soon. This isn't a ploy, like he said. He's got a great job, and I think this is an important part. He's got a great job. It's a better job right now than Texas A&M. And I think Texas A&M is a great job. I'm not one of these people that thinks that you can never win ever under any circumstances at Texas A&M. But at the same time, when you look at Dan Lanning, you look at Oregon, they're going into the Big Ten next year. You understand, look at the landscape of the Big Ten. Outside of Ohio State and Michigan, who has it rolling at any level anywhere close to Oregon? Even Penn State. They don't got it rolling like Oregon does. I guess you could argue Washington will be coming with them, but Washington, we'll see what they're like post Michael Penix. We'll see what happens there. I just bring it up because, Oregon is a great job, especially in the new landscape of the Big Ten. So I don't believe Dan Lanning is going anywhere, nor should he. Credit to him, because I just don't believe that that is something that he is interested in. Let's keep it going. There was another really big name that was asked about the coaching job on Monday. That was Florida State's Mike Norvell. So Mike Norvell, Florida State head coach, was asked about it. And really, he wasn't quite as emphatic as Dan Lanning, but did have an interesting comment when he was asked about it. Here is what Mike Norvell had to say about the whole situation at Texas A&M. He said, we're so excited about what we're building here, where we're going, the opportunity that is ahead. It's a special place, and that speaks for itself. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I can't control these things. So a lot of people heard that and said, oh, that is definitely not a no. And it's not a no. But first of all, let's make one thing clear. Mike Norvell, the head coach at Florida State, he is not a he's not a loud, brash guy by nature. He's not like Torres yelling and screaming all the time, okay? He's quiet. He's, soft-spoken, kind of, what do they say? Soft-spoken, but carries a heavy stick. Like his teams are prepared. They're disciplined. They're focused. And so I don't think because he didn't give the Dan Lanning alpha 0% chance, I don't think that means that there's some weird thing that Mike Norvell might sneak out the side door. First off, be amazingly ironic if Texas A&M hired another Florida State coach, which I don't think is going to happen. Two, it is worth noting, like Texas A&M, I think we assume that they have all this money. And I do think for the right coach, they're going to pay the premium that it would take to get a great coach out of their current contract. But Mike Norvell currently makes $8 million a year at Florida State, okay? Currently makes $8 million a year at Florida State with a $6 million buyout. Now, the $6 million buyout is nothing. But at the same time, like how much money are you going to have to pay Mike Norvell to seriously consider getting him out of Florida State? Is it 10? Is a 20%, 25% increase in salary enough to get you to leave an established place that's probably going to make the college football playoff this year? Would you go to 12? If you go to 12, you're essentially raising his salary by 50%. Is that enough? Like where do you have to go to get Mike Norvell interested? Beyond that, and I think this is the important part, it's kind of the same with Dan Lanning, which I didn't even mention. Like if you want to hire a coach that's in the middle of the playoff race, you might be waiting a while to get him. So you're going to wait. Like keep in mind, I don't believe there's a scenario where Mike Norvell takes the Texas A&M job, even if he was interested, and leaves Florida State with a chance to make the college football playoff. So if you're Texas A&M and you got a roster full of guys that you're trying to retain, you're going to wait until mid-January to get that guy in the building, maybe more, because I think at this point, it feels pretty safe. If Florida State wins out, they will make the college football playoff. If they have one loss, they probably will need a 2-loss Big 12 champ or something weird to happen in the Pac-12 or whatever. But Florida State's probably going to make the college football playoff. So it's like, you think Mike Norvell is leaving Florida State when they're in the college football playoff with a chance to win it to go to Texas A&M? I don't see it. I know it wasn't as emphatic of a no as people wanted, but I wouldn't be worried all too much if I was a Florida State fan. Let's keep it going. I thought this was interesting. So Billy Lucci, who I don't even believe he is the most plugged in Texas A&M insider, he was doing an interview the other day and he was asked about Lane Kiffin. So Kiffin kind of gave some non-committal or some answers that indicated he doesn't want the job. I thought it was interesting. Billy Lucci said that from his sourcing at Texas A&M, and he has the best sourcing in Aggie land. He said, I don't think we're that interested in Texas A&M, or I don't think we're that interested in Lane Kiffin. And so Lane Kiffin, I don't believe is a serious candidate at Texas A&M. One, because Billy Lucci says it. Two, let me say this about Kiffin. Great story, great narrative, fun guy, gets goofy, does weird things, pokes other coaches in the media. Also think a couple things. One, he's kind of perfect at Ole Miss. Two, he's got an $8 million salary, which, like Mike Norvell, again, you're going to take 10 to go to Texas A&M, a 20% raise, 25% raise. I mean, you're going to need a significant raise to go to Texas A&M. Two, I don't get the sense that Texas A&M people are keen on Lane Kiffin the way that he has talked about that program. But three, I don't know what it is with my media brethren. I don't know if they are too locked in to the idea that Lane Kiffin has to go somewhere. But I've said this for years. I kind of get the sense that the thirst for Lane Kiffin to take a bigger job and a better job or another job. I don't want to insinuate that anybody is definitively better. I think the thirst to get Lane Kiffin somewhere else is greater than the desire by these actual schools. Okay. I go back to 2 years ago. Remember, 2 years ago was the crazy coaching carousel. USC and LSU opened during the season. Then USC and LSU hired Oklahoma and Notre Dame's coaches. Miami opened up that winter. Florida opened up that winter. And if you remember, outside of USC, where Lane Kiffin was already fired once upon a time, and obviously not Notre Dame, like Lane Kiffin was basically insinuated as the lead candidate at all these places, at LSU, at Florida. Oh my goodness, can you imagine him at Miami? And you go on and on down the cycle, and it didn't feel like he was really legitimately pursued by any of those schools. Now, last year with Auburn, there's conflicting reports on how seriously he wanted that job. Now, I do think in this case, Auburn actually did want him. I don't know how much he wanted Auburn as much as to use Auburn to get a salary raise at Ole Miss. And so, listen, I get it. He's a sexy name. He's a fun name. I don't believe that Lane Kiffin is a real candidate there. It's oil and water. It would be ugly. I don't think half the fans and the media even like him. And now you're going to go in there with where you've made people upset for a long time. I don't see it. And again, $8+ million salary for Lane Kiffin. You'd have to pay him a significant raise to get him in the door. Couple new names that I did not mention on Monday that I just want to briefly get to here. The first one, did you see there's a little ember of a fire that blew up? And that's because on Monday's First Take, or I think it was actually Get Up, Stephen A. Smith said he thinks Deion Sanders should go to Texas A&M. Now, if you want like the 8-minute, 12-minute Torres rant on this, I did a separate clip on this on YouTube, so you can check out the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Or if you're already on the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel, check that out. But I bring it up because, Stephen A. Smith basically insinuated recruiting's easier, recruiting's better. He's going to get the dudes that he needs to win at the highest level. Texas A&M should go get Deion. Well, I credit Deion because I thought he gave a very interesting response as to why he is not actually interested in the job at his press conference. So he said two things. The first one, I think people said, oh, that's not a no. What he said was, he was asked about it. He said, he's basically asked, do you want the job? He said, I want to win a game. You think I'm really going to sit down and think about that kind of stuff? What strikes you about me that you guys really think I sit down and say, oh yeah, Stephen A., come on, I'm good. We've got to win. And so I think a lot of people saw that quote and said, well, that's not a no from Deion. But then he said something else that I thought was much more interesting when he was asked about how he handles coaching rumors with recruits. This is what he said. He said, I tell them what I told them when I came. I'm here. I tell them my mother's here, my sister's here, my dog is here, my daughter's here, 3 of my sons are here, my other daughter comes to darn near every home game. We're here. So listen, I can't speak to Coach Prime's dog, okay? I'm sure it's a lovely little 4-legged friend, and I'm sure they get along well, and I'm sure he loves Colorado or she loves Colorado, okay? Can't speak to that. But what I can say is, first of all, I think Coach Prime, I don't think makes sense to me with Texas A&M. But beyond that, I think people are missing the most important part on even trying to link Coach Prime to that job. He's got 2 sons currently on the roster and a daughter who plays basketball at Colorado, who used their one-time transfer to go from Jackson State to Colorado. And so to insinuate that Deion is a candidate at Texas A&M is to insinuate that he would have basically abandoned his children, because we've seen over the last couple months all of the conversation about the one-time transfer, the NCAA denying waivers for players who are trying to transfer for a second time. And so, yeah, I mean, Shedeur and Shiloh and his daughter could fight it because they're really public. I'm sure they would probably get a waiver. I just don't see Coach Prime like bailing on his kids, though, and leaving his kids in limbo. Again, they'd probably get the waiver, but it doesn't make sense. I think he's definitely going to ride it out at Colorado with his kids. I think he wants to be at Colorado because Colorado, to their credit, is letting him do things the way that he wants to. I don't see him as a candidate anywhere this year, and I don't think he's in a rush to leave Colorado. And then, of course, there's the opposite. Got to start winning. Obviously, sitting what are they at now? At 4-6 or whatever, 4-6, I guess, through 10 games. Got to get a couple wins to try to get bowl eligible, starting Washington State on Friday night. But no, I don't think that I don't think Deion Sanders is leaving Colorado. Last name that got very interesting on Tuesday. So Dabo Swinney, you may have heard of him. Tough go around these last couple of years at Clemson. It keeps getting worse. But Dabo Swinney, I think Paul Feinbaum was the one who kind of just said, maybe Dabo, things are not going well at Clemson. Maybe Dabo makes sense for Texas A&M. Fresh start, new fan base, and obviously he fits. He has won multiple national championships. I mean, I can't blame Texas A&M for going after him. But Dabo was asked about the Texas A&M coaching search. Here's what Dabo had to say about Texas A&M. Similar to Coach Prime, actually. He said, man, I'm just focused on this job. Always have been, trying to find a way to beat North Carolina. That's it. It must be November. That's all I can say. Listen, I know a lot of people saw that and like the Coach Prime stuff. Well, that's not really a no. It's not a no. I don't really see Dabo at Texas A&M. Now, if Texas A&M can get him, I think he should actually do it. But one, there's the salary stuff. I mean, I don't know how much more you can increase Dabo's salary, which is at like $11 million a year right now. But I don't know. I don't really know what you could really do with Dabo from a salary perspective. But here's the other thing. Dabo has been so stubborn about NIL and so stubborn about the portal. So you think he's just going to do a complete 180 and say, you know what? I'm going to go to the place that many believe is at the forefront of NIL. And I'm just going to be spending money left and right on players. I don't see Dabo doing that. Listen, I know it's gotten bad at Clemson. They have 4 losses. And I know, like, if they lose the next 2, then it's going to be really choppy. They play North Carolina this week, South Carolina next week. But I think he's at Clemson for life. I mean, the only job that I think he would ever consider leaving for is probably Alabama. I don't even know if Alabama wants him at this point. I guess in theory, if he really hated NIL and all that, he would consider the NFL. But I don't know if the folksy, all shucks, gee whiz, all that stuff, I don't know if it plays in most NFL cities. Like, could you see Dabo being the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers or the Chicago Bears? Like, no. So Dabo, my guess is that he retires at Clemson. He's got to get the train back on the tracks because that program is going in the wrong direction. But I don't see Dabo Swinney either. Very quickly, before we get out of here, by the way, people have been asking me, like, Torres, what do you think is actually going to happen? I'm going to stick with what I said from the beginning. I think Texas A&M is going to, listen, they're going to bark up the trees of the big names as they should. The Kalen DeBoers, the Dan Lannings, the whoever's. I really think it's going to be like a Mike Elko type. I actually think if I had to guess, I would guess Mike Elko is your next Texas A&M head football coach. That's not like super source. That's not like inside information. But I think you look at it, and I think Texas A&M is taking a holistic approach, as I said to start the segment. I don't think they have a grand plan of we fire Jimbo to go get this guy. We fire Jimbo to go get that guy. I think it's very much Jimbo isn't the answer, so we have to figure out who is. And so it'll be very interesting to see. I think it could be somebody maybe not even on our radar right now, somebody that isn't being discussed, isn't being talked about. But I truly believe in my heart of hearts, I don't think it's going to be the super big name. Told you Dan Lanning said no. I don't think there's interest in Lane Kiffin. Don't think there's interest in, I don't want to say there's no interest in Kalen DeBoer. I don't think Kalen DeBoer would leave Washington for that job. So I think it's going to be somebody either a little off the radar or not as high profile as people think. It's interesting, and it's interesting that you make this move at this time. As the SEC gets tougher next year, as Texas and Oklahoma come in, you need somebody that can walk into that room, like I've said all along, and look all those 5 stars in the eyes and say, stick around, we're going to get through this. What is most interesting to me, and I just want to say this, I know I'm going long, and we'll get to Mississippi State, that will get to some hoops, but I want to give Jimbo Fisher credit for one thing. Everybody wants to crush Jimbo Fisher. He proved that at Texas A&M, you can recruit elite classes and elite players and recruit at the highest level. And so I do think this job is appealing, but I do think you need that guy that can walk in that room and say, believe in me, believe in my vision. We can have success right away. We'll see what it is. We'll see if it happens. We will obviously be monitoring it day in and day out here on the Aaron Torres podcast and, of course, the YouTube channel as well. But if I had to take a guess right now, I'd say Mike Elko.